Are Carrion any good in patch 5.2? Serious talk, they're not as bad as my mind wants to remember. I see that at the end of Warhammer 2 they had worse stats. Not by a ton, but in ways that legitimately matter. I have no idea when they were buffed up a bit. Point being, yes, Legend rated a swarm of them as the worst he's ever rated so far, but as the Tomb King's only flying unit, of course it is meant to be used as part of a combined arms package. So let's see how we can make Carrion suck less, shall we? High ambitions, worthy of royalty. Recruited through control buildings. Carrion units come in at 24 entities on Ultra, and this is sort of why we automatically think they are bad. Fellbats have 60 entities. I'll be comparing as I go because it's relevant. Health is 5,000, 40 unit-wide for 210 per entity. Bats are 4,200 unit-wide. Armor is 20, bats get 0 without buffing or text. Leadership starts at 35, and that's pretty low as undead go. Bats get 30. Speed is 100, charge speed 90, so this is one of the units that slows down a little when it swoops. Like pterodons. In the interest of not simply going splat against the desert sands. Bats have 110 speed but charge speed 90. Melee attack begins at 26 with an attack interval of 4, no splash damage. Bats get melee attack 19, interval of 4.3, no splash damage. But of course, 60 bats can theoretically swarm 60 entities. Melee defense starts at 46 for the Carrion. Bats get 44, but there's 60 of them, all with 0 armor, of course. Weapon strength has been buffed, again I have no idea when. Weapon strength 47 is split between base 35 and armor piercing 12. Bats get 26, split 20 and 6 like a skeleton warrior. Charge bonus is 12 as opposed to bats getting 6, and mass is 80, where bats get 150. I know the Carrion are on the thinner side, but wow? Carrion are undead, duh, and have Vanguard deployment. Ditto for bats. So I've done this comparison to say this is why we thought Carrion sucked. There were less of them, though they still count as small targets for anti-large purposes. Sorry for letting that slip. So 24 entities covered only, and they didn't do much damage for all that. Well, now they do more damage, so that's something. In the redline skills... Okay, I just checked. No, they were not covered by any redline skills in Warhammer 2. In 3, they fall under Elite Cavalrymen, at 3 pips granting plus 12% speed and plus 12% weapon strength. The speed is extremely helpful. I checked in-game, and Doom Rider is indeed what boosts rank 7 Carrion, so that's plus 10 armor, plus 5 melee attack, and 10% physical resistance, which oddly is some of the best buffs you could get for this particular unit. In the Wisdom of the Third Dynasty, not necessarily one people prioritize, but one I like to get, the Boon of Yualat grants melee defense plus 5 for Carrion, armor piercing damage plus 2, and charge bonus plus 8. What I mean by AP damage plus 2 is that the stat card's AP portion goes up by 2 per entity per attack. It literally adds up. Then that's it for techs. How do you use Carrion? Yes, that's the conundrum, isn't it? Actually, I'm going mostly by speculation because I rarely use the unit, but I'd venture to say 2 things for such an easily lost unit. First, this faction is unusual for its ferocious separation between things that splash different sizes of enemies and how many enemies are splashed and damaged at a time, though knockback, knockdown, and knock-up are always helpful to prevent damage. For inflicting it, Ushapti are 16 entities times 4 damaged. Necropolis Knights are 24 entities times 3 damaged. That's the theoretical max, and that's only for small targets. Skeleton Chariots are 12 entities times 2 damage, though collision attacks will extend that too if the charge hasn't fully stopped, yet on a per second basis. Skeleton Horsemen and variants are 60 entities times 1 damaged. Then you have Skeleton Warriors and Spearmen with rectangles of 160 entities, your other melee infantry with 120 entities, but for both cases, not all of them can attack at once, certainly. And then you have Carrion, which are 24 entities hitting 24 targets. So what do you do with them? Well, the only sane conclusion is this. Tie something down with this outsized melee defense, accept any damage you can inflict with them as a good thing, and quickly, very quickly, ram something else into the tied down unit's rear, be it missile infantry, artillery, or even spearmen, to keep them from bracing. And so, we circle back to the most important aspect of this unit, more important than anything else, even the fact it flies. Vanguard deployment. Except for some idiot attacking you when you're in the fortified stance, you're extremely limited in what you can actually use Vanguard deployment with. Heralds and stuff can help, yes, but we're basically talking about Tomb Scorpions, Stalkers, which aren't that fast, Skeleton Horsemen, and Skeleton Horse Archers, and sometimes the Chariots, as per the special stuff. The exception is if you're playing Arkan. He gets plenty more, but those are Vampire Count units. So, in practice, you are tying things down for Horsemen or even Horse Archers to slam in, or Stalkers to maneuver for ideal shots, plus the Horse Archers themselves, or for Tomb Scorpions to belly-tail flop into the middle of madness and make a mess, while the Carrion are tying things down. Alternatively, you're doing mad flanks as the enemy separates its force and leaves artillery behind, using Carrion as the fastest, and then using other mobile units, not necessarily the above, but perhaps chariots, perhaps war sphinxes, perhaps a tomb prince, and escort them, because unless it's dwarfs or, God forbid, slayers with a goblin hewer, you might be able to at least pin them down and outdefend an artillery crew and chew it apart yourself. Anything else, you need the help, not because the entities are that bad, but because they do not cover enough of enemy units to not drown in their numbers. So these are the considerations. Of course, Carrion alone are terrible. Of course, Carrion, even with other Carrion, are better still but extremely fragile. But when you fly, you can pick your fights. Until you face gyrocopters. And if it comes to that, flee back to friendly lines and hope there's something left after Stalker or Archer wipes that junk out. Put simply, these tactics are nigh meaningless against rush factions with no ranged, except as a rear charge morale debuff at inconvenient times and places for the enemy. But otherwise, hey, some enemies are vulnerable to this, including the ever-popular artillery sniping example, because that does come up. It's just that you'd love to have a backup to follow the Carrion in. But what if you do? Yes, it's trying to maximize the most out of some of the quote-unquote weakest units in the faction, perhaps the game. But if that's enough to wipe the floor with a bunch of handgunners, that alone just might have won you the fight. It's up to you. One last note added after more experimentation. If you send Carrion in second rather than first, hitting the backs of engaged targets way on the flanks, you have a much better chance of the Carrion surviving once that combat is over. It's highly unlikely to work that way in the main fight, but what's your worst case here? You lose Carrion and can replace it with a Skeleton Spearman unit the next turn? That's not bad. So focus on what you can get for them rather than perch them on ancient ruins just to look pretty. But I will say, if CA is going to change this, the mass is the biggest weakness. It's not that they can't survive a fight necessarily, it's that if they get into a bad engagement, they can't get out. 80 mass is equal to an individual Skeleton Spearman entity. It's really, really light. So it's just not, they just can't get on their own. You have to either win or die. Those are the only two options. Anyway, that's it. My advice is used up. Take care, have fun, and carry on.